speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. FAST. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org, brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli, back behind enemy lines, and it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the man who is out there in front for Tea Party Forward, the chairman of Tea Party Forward, Mr. Niger Innis. Niger, thanks for coming back on the show, pal.
Great to be on with you again.
Well, listen, it's great to be on with you. There's so much to talk about, but I got to talk to you about the news that broke this week. Of course, what happened in the verdict coming down in Baltimore, and the timing of it. It seems like you felt, and you have the pulse of what's going on, because I received an email from you and your organization, Tea Party Forward, because I subscribe, and I did so at teapartyforward.com.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Talking about Black Lives Matter and that movement. It seems like it's all pretty timely right now. Why don't you tell everybody all about the email that you recently sent out and the statement you made about Black Lives Matter?
Well, it seems apparently clear to me that the Black Lives Matter campaign, which I think is very wrongly asserted as Black Lives Matter, because it's not really about Black lives. It's about a progressive, quite frankly, communist agenda that is being funded by the likes of George Soros, and that has a mix of white and black and, I guess, Latino progressives. I really think it's about time to call them communists, that have come together, that have basically promoted a left-wing Marxist agenda for the entire country. They use the moniker Black Lives Matter, but quite frankly, you have a lot of retreads and recycled hippies from the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they have captured the media's attention and hence the nation's attention. Of course, we know about what they did in Ferguson with the riots, what they did in Baltimore as well, and then of course we know in Baltimore a courageous black judge actually came down and acquitted a white police officer of any charges against the murder of Fred Gray, which of course the Black Lives Matter made a big deal of. There was a scurrilous charges that were against this police officer. He was doing his job, doing his duty in the community, and he certainly should not be brought up, should not have been brought up on criminal charges. And I think the judge's reaction and the judge's verdict is a reflection of that reality. We have gotten wind through our own intelligence networks that the Black Lives Matter campaign plans to cause a ruckus at the Republican convention, and we are urging patriots, good Americans all, whites, blacks, Latinos, Asians, to come together to oppose them with an all lives matter counteroffensive at the Republican convention. And you can join us in that crusade and support that crusade by going to teapartyforward.com. That's teapartyforward.com.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned how the Black Lives Matter movement is sort of co-opted by a far-left communist movement. When I was in New York City when they had the march down by City Hall when the Staten Island Eric Garner issue was blowing up. And in the crowd were predominantly white, middle-aged people holding pre-made signs for the Revolutionary Communist Party. Thank you so much for mentioning that and bringing that out. Is this really an organized way to try to get Hillary Clinton into the White House, or is this just a way to destroy any sort of Republican movement or any sort of conservative movement?
See, and I think that's a brilliant question that you asked. I actually think it is the first, not so much the latter. The latter is maybe a breadcrumb from the main course, but the main course is to get Hillary Clinton elected. After 7 years, and it will end up being 8 years, of the most left-wing president that we have had, certainly in this, for the last 100 years, maybe going back to Woodrow Wilson. What we have as a result of this failed presidency There's utter destruction of the black community. You have unemployment rate among young black teens in cities like Chicago and Detroit and Los Angeles at Great Depression era numbers. And so Hillary Clinton cannot legitimately run on the third term of Barack Hussein Obama. The progressives who have had their agenda pretty much laid out by this president, certainly for the first 2 years and predominantly over the last 5 years, and they have no results from it. They have in fact, they rail against income inequality, and the classes are more unequal than they ever have been since the Gilded Age. There's more income inequality under this progressive crony capitalist government than there ever has been. And those are the fruits of the most progressive presidency. So they can't run on a record. So what do they have to do to stir up the kind of big numbers that they got in the Black and Latino community in 2008 and 2012? They got to stir up this phony artificial movement called Black Lives Matter and create an unnecessary friction and tension between the police and the communities that they serve.
And you know, folks, those of you listening to Niger Innis right now, this is a man who knows from whence he speaks, because this is a man who not only he himself has devoted himself to the cause of civil rights, but he's second generation in fighting for racial equality and just fighting for civil rights. Niger, tell people what a real movement would look like that is fighting for racial equality, gender equality, things like that, and compare it to what Black Lives Matter is doing and sort of the terroristic tactics that they're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. They are terrorist tactics. They are anarchist tactics, and they have nothing to do with what was a very peaceful, integrated, multiracial movement, that was promoting the American flag, that was promoting American values. What we were saying in the Civil Rights Revolution was we wanted to expand Americanness. We wanted to expand what it meant to be a full citizen of this country. We weren't talking about revolution. We were not talking about certainly a communist revolution. We were not talking about overthrowing the government and the laws of our nation. We were saying we want those laws to be expanded to all Americans. And that is quite different than what this anarchist, communist, inspired agenda of the Black Lives Matter movement is. I mean, just one example, which makes it so crystal clear that this is not about Black lives at all, is one of their planks on their platform is to promote the most radical open border policy in our country, so that you would not only have continued illegal immigration, but you would have massive legal immigration as well. And as we know, when you have too much immigration into the country, and I'm not a immigration prohibitionist, but when you have too much immigration in our country, it depresses wages, and it creates a situation where native-born blacks and Latinos and whites are basically pushed out of the market, because you've got people coming from third world countries that will work for much lower wages. So in spite of these guys calling themselves Black Lives Matter, they really are promoting policies and a progressive agenda that actually undermine Black lives all over this country. And that is not the civil rights movement. What we are putting together, which is All Lives Matter, counteroffensive and campaign, is going to be the spirit of the civil rights movement. We're going to take the spirit of the civil rights movement. You know, we have great civil rights leaders like my father, Roy Innis, longtime chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality, Andrew Young, who's still alive, and many others that reflect that peaceful, integrated effort to change our country for the better and to expand the Constitution and its protections, not to undermine them.
And growing up, sir, your father, Roy Innis, was one of the first voices I can remember talking about racial equality when I was growing up. And what a brilliant man. What an amazing legacy that you're keeping. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, Tea Party Forward, and get involved with your All Lives Matter movement that's going to be taking place at the RNC.
Yes, please go to teapartyforward.com. That's teapartyforward.com. You can also look for me on Twitter. It's Niger Innis at TTP Niger Innis at TTP on Twitter. You can tweet me. You can go to the website. You can join Tea Party Forward, and you can join this movement, All Lives Matter. I look forward to seeing you all and being on your show again as we get closer to Cleveland in July.
Thank you, Niger Innis. Tea Party Forward. Everybody, money and people make politics go. If you can't give, volunteer with Tea Party Forward, a great organization. Niger, thanks for coming on the show, pal.
Thank you, my friend. You take care.
The show will be right back. But first, a word from Al Sharpton.
Good evening, Rev. Thanks
Good evening,
to
Rev.
you, Ed. Is this Groundhog Day 2? We are watching that was Attorney General Eric Holder, ABDs, about some Republicans at home are already beating the drums of war. Today, the Pentagon refuted that claim. And he said the American people do not want him to, quote, dwiddling, they do not want him dwiddling his thumbs. You can get a gig as a contortionist. Intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. We don't leave our women or men in uniform behind. It's a monument to the hubris of Dick Cheney, Representative Raul Labrador. Years of abuse. I personally apologize to Mr. Peebles. Just ask to soon-to-be former Congressman. Democrats are outright jitty. CIA's counterterrorism center. Veteran Affairs Secretary Shinseki. Why do I always mess up his name? Shinseki. I love my critics. I have fun with that.
Politics Nation with the Reverend Al Sharpton starts right now. Good evening, Rev.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson.
But wait, there's more.
And we will much about that be committed. So there's no real conflict. Michael Druniak, including Lincoln himself, Daniel Day-Lewis. Behind Monica Lewinsky, the one and only Trey Songz is here. But Allison Lundergan Grimes, Gina De Jesus, when Gina De Jesus, Tea Party challenger Matt Bivens. People don't want to have their Social Security overall. The Republican savior, Mark Rubio's big night. In evolution and Galileo, I mean this whole thing of Galileo, America's changed. Unless IT and Skillets, President Putin doing something similar back in, it won't change this fundamental fact about the GOP. Just how absurd these attacks is. Nearly 6 months after the dangerous traffic jam, the Thai military says, my friend for many years, Ilyana Van Zandt. There's nothing there.
And they gave this guy a TV show? Let's get back to our show.
Gene Baradelli, back behind me lines. Some people in the chat room are saying that the Reverend Al stuff is getting old. I beg to differ. I love giving him equal time here on the show. A lot of funny stuff there. Back to our discussion of the verdict of Officer Edward Nero in Baltimore, and just a little more about that and the reaction to that. I'm going to do something that has never been done on this show. I'm going to play a clip from The View. Yes, you heard that right. The View. That show. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a little interesting for me too. But I gotta say, one of the co-hosts on there, of course, Whoopi Goldberg is a normal, BS self, but she's put in check by co-host Sunny Huston, who is a former prosecutor, legal analyst, and listen, I'm going to let this play without comment, but listen to the scathing critique of State Attorney Marilyn Mosby.
We just learned that the Baltimore police officer Edward Nero has been acquitted of all charges in the death of Freddie Gray. This is, you know, this sparks